witnessed firsthand that the body repairs. When have you learned about repair in your medical training?
None.
It's inexistent. So in science, if you don't have an explanation for something, a word for it, it's invisible. Nobody talks about it. Go rest and you'll recover. You break a bone, I put you in a cast, come back and see me in 6 weeks. There's no language about what is happening during that time in that cast, in that black box. And it's stem cells that are repairing.
True.
Feel ni pancreatic cancer
Bersama saya Dr. Roland Victor.
benda yang one of the worst stress can happen bila you makan tak sedap.
Doktor, saya punya culture kena makan nasi.
Zaman moden.
That every second of your life you either earn or learn.
Batu Medic Show. Selamat datang ke lagi satu episod Lesung Batu Medic Show bersama saya Dr. Roland Victor. Dan hari ini kita akan bincangkan seperti biasa satu topik lagi menarik dalam bidang perubatan. Dan hari ini kita nak lesung apa pula? Topik kita hari ini adalah stem cell. Dan hari ini sebelum kita mulakan, konten hari ini telah dibawakan khas oleh Stemregen. Stemregen bukan salah satu company daripada Amerika Syarikat yang menawarkan rawatan ataupun alternatif suplemen yang boleh membantu meningkatkan keupayaan stem cell badan anda. Untuk maklumat lebih lanjut, anda boleh pergi kepada layar sosial di bawah apaccollagen.com ataupun apaccollagen.com untuk mengetahui lebih lanjut ataupun membeli produk daripada Stemregen. Dan Stemregen, nak tambah lagi satu, Stemregen adalah merupakan produk yang berdaftar sebagai suplemen di Malaysia. So mereka memiliki MAL certificate dan registration. So guest saya hari ini datang jauh daripada Amerika Syarikat. Dia merupakan seorang yang pakar dalam bidang kajian stem cell. Dan saya bertuah, didengarkan dia sudah pernah datang ke Malaysia lebih daripada 15 tahun sebelum ni. Dan tidak lain dan tidak bukan Drapeau. Drapeau, welcome to Lesung Batu Medic Show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's been an honor to have you here in Kuala Lumpur. It's heard that you have been here for more than 15 years. Is that true?
That's true.
That's true. So let's get the ball rolling. The topic of discussion today is to further dwell and understand more about stem cell. Of course, in Malaysia, in terms of practices, the word of stem cell therapy, whether it's in a form of product, whether in terms of injection, IV infusion, has already been in the medical industry. I think for more than at least 15 years, I would say. You've been an expert. You've been an author of cracking the stem cell code. I just want to hear from the horse's mouth to the audience, what is stem cells?
I think that the best way to define a stem cell is to define what is not a stem cell. So every cell in your body are called somatic cells. They have one specific function. They will never transform, and they will never, for the most part, never multiply. So you take a cell of your heart, it contracts. A cell of your retina responds to light. They will never change. That's the only thing that will happen is one day they will die. At the other end of that spectrum, you have stem cells. Stem cells, think of them almost like as blank cells. Like they are nothing as a stem cell, meaning they have no function. Their function is in their ability to transform into another type of cell. So historically, they were considered to be and known to be precursors to blood cells, white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets. The discovery that really gave rise to everything that we know today in stem cell research is that we discovered that stem cells from the bone marrow, not only they can become blood cells, but they can also become virtually every single kind of cells in the body. So they are the repair system of the body.
Nice. So when you mention about bone marrow, of course, a lot of people here are pretty much familiar with stem cell, especially during birth. So there's a lot of companies that offer cord blood stem cell banking. And this is technically, like you said, eukaryotic stem cells taken from the Wharton's jelly, where they get it from the umbilical cord and they are stored. How do you see that difference between cord blood stem cells, which a lot of people here are pretty familiar with, and compared to like bone marrow stem cells?
This is a big question. We could probably spend the hour on that question.
I think days.
And you will ask that question to 10 people, you're probably going to get 10 answers. So let me try to be as objective as I can. When stem cells were discovered as we know them today, so we're in very early 2000, so 2000, 2001, the belief was that stem cells from the bone marrow are really not as powerful as either embryonic stem cells or umbilical cord stem cells. So it triggered a whole rush to find ways to collect these umbilical cord stem cells, Wharton jelly, placental stem cells, preserve them because they were extremely precious. But as time moved on, we kind of realized that stem cells from the bone marrow are just as potent. So they're not exactly the same because age changes stem cells. So as we age, our stem cells are not as effective as when the day we're born. So in that way, stem cells, umbilical cord stem cells, are more powerful, if you want. But still, at 60, 70 years old, your stem cells are still good enough. We have amazing stories of recovery just by having people release their own stem cells. So that's really a difference. The difference is that umbilical cord stem cells may be more potent, but the bigger question to me in this whole picture is that, let's say you collect stem cells on the day that you are born or your son is born, and your son or you want to utilize these stem cells in 20, 30, 40 years. The question that has not been fully answered, and people who really work in that field will tell you, no, that it's fine, they're well preserved. But we don't know at this point how effective that preservation is. When you thaw these stem cells in 40 years from now, how effective are they compared to, let's say, your adipose stem cells at that time that are fresh and alive? That question is open. And then you're limited into how many of these umbilical cord stem cells you can have. You're completely unlimited in terms of your adipose-derived stem cells or your bone marrow stem cells. So the question is more like, what use are you going to make with them? And the deeper question is to understand that other types of stem cells are available all the time during your entire life.
Exactly, and that also brings to the thought process of, you see, we all are born with this innate stem cell system. By birth, I think we have a large amount. As you can see how kids, when they go through a small injury or a small wound, the ability to regenerate is extremely fast compared to an adult. And that's because of the ability and the presence of the level of stem cells, I mean the volume of it, which is circulating, that is able to go into a tissue, granulate, and recover. Now the question is, when we look into adults, multi-factors, lifestyle, chronic disease, epigenetics, genetics, and then contribute to how much of stem cells that are present. So a lot of thoughts coming today is like, look, do we still have enough stem cells in our body, or we need support externally? What's your take on this?
Well, let me start by just going back to what you said before, because I think it is a reality in science, and you need to almost like go into the philosophy of science to see these kinds of things. But don't you think it's amazing that we've all had injuries as children?
Yes.
All of us, we've had injuries in our life. We broke bones, we had injuries. They all repaired. So we have all witnessed firsthand that the body repairs. When have you learned about repair in your medical training?
None.
It's so in science, if you don't have an explanation for something, a word for it, it's invisible. Nobody talks about it. Go rest and you'll recover. You break a bone, I put you in a cast, come back and see me in 6 weeks. There's no language about what is happening during that time in that cast, in that black box. And it's stem cells that are repairing.
True. In fact, when you're looking into the whole the organism in terms of organs, the recovery mechanism is not discussed.
It's not discussed.
We just always gerrymandered every single organ into one compartment, and there is no form of uniformity. There's connectiveness between A and B. It's always everything thought separate. And even if you look into the medical specialization, it's still compartmentalized like that.
Yeah, and you get two individuals with the same heart attack. One recovers very well, the other one doesn't. Why? What's the difference between the two? And these questions, I'm not saying it's not seen, it is seen because we handle the people who did not recover well with specific protocols. But the question as to why is the difference, we just say, oh, interpersonal difference. It's not even a discussion. And really the answer to that question is that it's all a matter of stem cells. How many stem cells you have in your bloodstream available to participate to this process of tissue repair will determine what will be the outcome of any kind of injury that anybody goes through. So to come back to your question, there is an age-related, very natural decline in the number of circulating stem cells. And I ask myself many years, why is it that if we simply double the number of stem cells in circulation, we can have a dramatic impact in someone's health? We've seen this in thousands of people. So why is it that in our evolution, we did not just end up with a little bit more stem cells? It would have made such a big difference. And digging a little bit into this, we have to understand we evolved over tens of thousands of years with a lifespan, average lifespan of about 30 years of age.
30.
So I'm not saying nobody lived longer. My point is
The
that
average.
as a population, as a humanity, as a species, we did not need to repair effectively past 30 years of age. It has not been part of the evolution. So longevity, let's put it this way, longevity has not been selected. And that is squarely reflected by the fact that we're born with red marrow that makes stem cells. Very early in life, the red marrow converts into fatty marrow that does not make stem cells. And by age 30, we're still effective. You get an injury at age 30, you still repair very well, but you have lost 90% of the stem cells that you're born with. And that decline continues, and that is why in your 40s, your 50s, now you really don't repair like you used to. You just don't have enough stem cells in circulation. So the point is that if we can put a little bit more stem cells in circulation, let's say we just double or triple the number of stem cells in circulation. At 50, we would give you back your ability to repair that you had at 30.
Understand. So you mentioned the specific, but putting back stem cells into the system. What most physicians see around is stem cell therapies, whether it's going to be for orthopedics, joint injuries, or infusion, where stem cells are used, whether it's on label or off label. It's been practiced globally at this point as we speak, whether it's in research or non research based. Putting in the stem cells. Okay, this is a bit of I wouldn't want to use the word conflicting, but there is one perspective that, look, we can continuously regenerate our own present innate stem cells. And then there's a phase B of like, let's load ourselves with 100 million, 200 million mesenchymal stem cells and see what happens. I want to ask that when we introduce an external mesenchymal stem cells, what happens? Does it go into the bone marrow or the thymus gland and it goes and there's something called like homing, where it sits there, it docks there, it duplicates to sort of like assist the body, or even without doing that, just by stimulating or enhancing our innate stem cell system, we could almost achieve the same therapeutic effect?
These are big questions. Like there's many layers to these questions. I'll try to make it complete and simple. When we inject, let's say, 100 million stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, the estimation and the understanding at this point is that you have about 10-15% survival of these stem cells. They're big, so oftentimes they get caught in the lung. So some studies have shown that they end up being caught in the lung and they just die in the lung. They release exosomes. I'm not saying they're worthless. So they release compounds, and it's
beneficial.
There's a benefit to them. But you end up with really having increased your number of stem cells in circulation by, let's say, 10 to 15 million. We will come back to that later, but you take 2 capsules of Stemregen, you will release 10 million of your own stem cells.
Wow.
And you do this naturally every day. Let me put it in a different way. Those 10, 15 millions that you have obtained right now through an injection, that right now means a lot to you because you paid a lot of money for them.
Exactly.
Okay? Like it's a treatment. You think of these stem cells as being the only stem cells in your life that matter. And the point is that you have released stem cells every day of your life since the day you're born, way more, like hundreds of times more than what you got in that injection, and you will continue for the rest of your lives. So that stem cell, I'm not saying it's worthless, But what I'm saying is that when we start to look at this reality within the deeper understanding of what is really the natural role of stem cells in the body, what are our own stem cells, what are they doing in the body in terms of repair, what role do they play in disease formation? When we understand all of this, I'm not saying injection of stem cells is not relevant, but it has a completely different meaning. And you can, through stem cell injection, you can boost the bone marrow because a lot of these stem cells will go back to the bone marrow. So you could reseed the bone marrow and then be a better mobilizer in the future after that injection. All of these are possibilities, but they have not been really studied so far. So it's fairly young as a new field of research, extremely promising. I think, to me, the weakness of all of this is that the promise oftentimes is in genetic manipulation of these stem cells, injecting specific genes in these, spiking them, like tweaking things so that we can utilize stem cells as a vector for different things. And while we go on all of this, what we forget completely is that every day of your life, you're alive today because your stem cells have done their job since the day you're born. Why don't we just pause and look at this amazing regenerative power that we have and just tap into it?
Yeah, I think like what you said is like this. Let's go back to the basic of our own body's ability and look like how we can enhance it. How long have you been doing research in stem cells?
In stem cells, honestly, my background is neurophysiology. So I was doing brain research on epilepsy and memory. And I was hired by a company to study a specific plant to understand its mechanism of action. And in 2001, I came across a paper describing, for the first time to my knowledge, a stem cell going from the bone marrow, going to the brain and becoming a brain cell.
Wow.
So you go back in 2001, I mean,
It was so
I don't know
new.
when you had your medical training.
I haven't gone in.
Okay. But I am sure you were told the same thing that I was told. Number one, stem cells are only precursors to blood cells. This is probably still what is being taught in college, in med school today. And second, of all parts or organs of your body, the brain is the one that does not repair. So now there's a stem cell that goes from the bone marrow to the brain and become a brain cell. I thought it was pretty compelling. Then I went back to look in the scientific literature what else I could find, and I found an article documenting the same thing with stem cells going to the liver and to the heart. So I just thought, if stem cells can go to the brain, liver, and the heart, why not the pancreas, the lung, the skin, and the rest? Makes no sense that it's those three and not the rest. Zero sense. So that means it's just a matter of time. Scientists will document that stem cells can become everything. And if they can become everything, it has to be their function in the body. How do you see, like you open your eyes and your retina responds to light. This is not random. That's what your retinal cells are meant to do. So if a stem cell goes to the brain and become a brain cell, it cannot be like just a random fluke. It has to be their function. So we published an article in the journal Medical Hypotheses suggesting that stem cells are the repair system of the body. And in the back of my mind, what if that plant that I was working on, it was bringing many kinds of health benefits? What if its role, its function, its mechanism of action was to put more stem cells in circulation? So we bought the equipment to count stem cells. We started to count stem cells, and we discovered that that plant was acting as a stem cell mobilizer, putting more stem cells in circulation. So I dropped everything that I was doing in anywhere with any other products, and I just basically dove into this whole field of stem cell research, which is, as we've talked about a little bit before during this conversation, endogenous stem cell mobilization. Just tapping into stem cells by releasing our own stem cells, which is something that, although I discovered this, let's say in 2001, 2002, it took more than a decade before this started to be something on the marketplace. And still to this day, before this discussion, you probably never really heard about it. So it's still not really present on the marketplace. Had this been known before, like if in 2001, this understanding that your stem cells are just as regenerative as stem cells that you will get from an umbilical cord or somewhere else, probably that the whole field of stem cell treatment, as we see it today, would have evolved completely differently. So I think we are where we are right now with the whole choices and options that we have with stem cell treatments, because what we know today with the role of our own stem cells, we did not know this 20 years ago.
Yep.
But that's where I started.
So, going forward from the research where you first initiated looking into the plant-based products, herbs, and also algae, where did this exploration go? I mean, you have a list of ingredients which I see that are able to harness the ability of the stem cells? Guide me through.
Okay. I mean, honestly, the answer is very simple. You just put yourself in my shoes and we can go through the process. I discovered that there's a plant that works by releasing our own stem cells. So somebody comes in the lab, they rest for an hour, then we take a blood sample, then we give them a placebo or the plant that we're studying. At the time, it was this blue-green algae. And then we take another blood sample an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later. And then they come back a week later and we do exactly the same thing. And this time we give them placebo or the plant, whichever we gave them the first time, we give them the other one. And then we do the exact same process. The placebo is aimed at determining their circadian cycle in the number of stem cells in circulation. They're maximum at about 5 a.m. and then they slowly go down lower at 5 p.m. And there is this cycle in the number of stem cells in circulation. So when somebody shows up in the lab at 8, normally their stem cells should normally just go down over time. So, and we take the response that we have with the plant extract and we make the difference. So that tells us how many additional stem cells we have put in the bloodstream with the use of that plant. So that's how we can determine that research. So when we documented all of that, then the next question in my mind was, we evolve in symbiosis with the environment. Like there's not only one plant that stimulates the immune system.
Exactly.
There cannot be just one plant that stimulates the repair system. So there has to be others. So how do you find them? So you just step back and think of what are the plants that historically have been associated with many kinds of benefits. If I ask you, first thing that will come to mind is the goji berries for longevity, medicinal mushroom, adaptogens, seaweeds, brown seaweeds with fucoidan. And I'm sure you have more from Malaysia that maybe it would be amazing to go and test. So those plants,
I will definitely share with you some.
There you go. So those plants that have been historically associated with many benefits. So I went in the lab and I tested them. And it turns out that almost, I would say, we tested, let's say, around 20. 80% of them have an effect on stem cells. So it's much more common than we discover it. It's a unique discovery. It looks exceptional. Actually, it's like so many things in our life can affect stem cells. The point is like which one has the most and the greatest effect. That's the one we want to use to really boost the repair system of the body. And those big star ingredients, I discovered them when I started to look in remote areas of the world. Like Madagascar, they don't have Chinese ginseng or Chinese medicinal mushroom.
The island is already isolated.
Yeah, whatever is there, that's what they use. So
Correct.
What are they using? What is their go-to plant for a lot of different problems? And in Madagascar, they have like 65 species of aloe. And as I was
Aloe
traveling,
vera,
aloe. So
it's
aloe vera,
different.
ferox.
Okay.
There's 65 species of these different aloe.
Wow.
So many, many different kinds. Some look the same, some look very, very different. And of all of those, there's 3 or 4 that are edible. And of all of those, there's only one that in Madagascar they use for their regenerative product called Vahona in Madagascar. So I took Vahona. They sell that in markets as little black beads. It's basically gel that is dried, mixed with the ash of the plant, so that it can be sun dried and it looks like a black pea.
Okay.
And you swallow these, and we got the strongest response that we had seen so far at that time. And since then, the strongest response we have seen. So understanding how they make these little black beads, we went and got our own extract from Aloe macroclada that we derived. We went back in the lab, and we just got the strongest response that we have so far. But it's not available in the marketplace, so we had to go and develop a network of harvesters. It's on the CITES list, so we can't touch it as non-Malagasy. So we have to work with Malagasy people in Madagascar to collect it. It's in the wild, so we had to survey with in collaboration with the University of Antananarivo to survey the wild population, so that we can then start a nursery, grow some of these baby plants, go and replant them in the wild. We have replanted about 100,000 plants so far.
Oh, wow. That's
But that's how
a big farm.
So all these ingredients were discovered in a very, very organic way. It's not I'm looking at an article in the paper, or I look at another product, they have cool ingredients, and I just copy these ingredients. Every single one went through this sort of process. Another very interesting one is sea buckthorn berry.
I know it as the Genghis Khan.
There you go.
berry.
There you go. So and actually, even before Genghis Khan with Alexander the Great, because it has, the Latin name of sea buckthorn berry is Hippophae. Hippo means
Hippophae,
horse,
okay.
Phae means light. So it means shining horse.
Okay.
And it's Alexander the Great going through his conquest in Western China, at some point he abandoned a herd of wounded horses, wounded
I
in
heard
battle,
this story.
and he left them to die. You heard the story?
Yes.
and he came back, and there was like
They
a
all
herd of
recovered.
vibrant horses with a shiny coat, which is a sign of health. So the berry was called shiny horse. It's a fascinating story. And then it was incorporated into Chinese medicine, Mongolian medicine, Tibetan medicine, used for lung disease, lung cancer, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and to help speed up the repair from bone fractures, burn to the skin, or injury to the skin.
Fantastic,
Look at the
right?
spread.
When you see like one single product can
Yeah.
give you that much of
Correct.
deliverables.
So that's telling me, well, let's test it for stem cells.
And what did you find when you did that?
Well, I went to on the Tibetan plateau. I connected with a farm. We derived an extract. We tested it, and we saw it's the second best ingredient that we have right now in terms of increasing the number of stem cells in circulation. So each of these ingredients were discovered through this process.
So there's also Panax ginseng root
Panax
extract.
noda ginseng. So as I did a literature search, that's the only ingredient in there that we have not done the studies ourselves. But as I went into the scientific literature, I found a number of references documenting how the original ginseng, so not Korean ginseng, American ginseng, but Chinese ginseng, Panax noda ginseng, the original ginseng, had been documented to significantly increase the number of stem cells in circulation with documentation of actual mechanisms of action. So we simply took that ingredient, got a really, really good source, and then included that in the product as well.
Nice. Is there other things that you would like to share? That's also
Fucus, for example, fucus is one of the bladderwrack, kelp.
Kelp.
Is one of a number of species of brown seaweed. All brown seaweed has a polysaccharide called fucoidan, which is a fucose-rich sort of mega complex polysaccharide, and it had been documented historically to be good for cancer and for inflammation. But there's a fellow in the early, I think it was like 2003, that did some work and showed that by injecting this in an animal, you trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. Then there's another team developing these polysaccharides, fucoidan, that showed that consumption of a large amount increases the number of stem cells in circulation. So we then took our own protocol, which was to look not over 2-3 weeks or a month, but over just a few hours. And we found that, like the other products that we have seen, it triggers an increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. So a lot of the work was done with a seaweed called Ondaria pinnatifida, wakame in Japanese food.
Okay.
But fucus contains another ingredient along with fucoidan. So when you do the extract, there's also a polyphenol called fluorotannins. You may have heard, or have you heard of a seaweed called Eclonia cava? So Eclonia cava of the shore of Korea, Japan, has been associated with like longevity, old people taking this product and having like amazing health as they age. The reason, the active compound is fluorotannins. So kelp is a source of both fucoidan and fluorotannins. So that's why I chose that source of fucoidan, so that we can just add more punch, to the product.
Understand. I also noted there's beta glucan and colostrum. Colostrum, I think a lot of people in Malaysia here are pretty much familiar with a lot of products in the market that provide this sort of the first milk extracts you're gonna get, very rich in growth factors, insulin-like growth factors and stuff. So the question I would like to ask, there's a lot of herbs and plant extract, and then comes a milk extract. What was the thought?
My aim in developing Stemregen is that I had worked like before. Our first product was just the blue-green algae extract. And as we're trying to really penetrate the medical community to show that releasing your own stem cells is up to par with injecting stem cells, you can get very similar results. So to make this accepted, it had to be used by the medical profession. A blue-green algae extract as itself doesn't fit with being worked with the medical profession. So we had to dive deeper into the science, into more ingredients, document more ingredients. So the aim for me with Stemregen is to have a product that is powerful enough to really call the attention of the medical community, so that we can start to document many cases, so that at the end, people or the medical community can really think we can inject stem cells or we can stimulate the body's innate ability to repair. And in this process, I looked at many, many different compounds. They're not all plants. One of them is like colostrum. Because, like we talked about before, if you start to think about what has been associated with many benefits, Colostrum is one of them.
Definitely.
So I just happened through connections to work with a fellow. This is in South Dakota, and he had a very unique type of colostrum. It was called highly fractionated colostrum. So you normally will pay about, for a good source of colostrum, $30 to $50 a kilo. The colostrum that we're using, $850 a kilo. It's a very different colostrum, but it's like a high concentration of those growth factors. So I really want to test it for stem cells. And then we tested it. We saw something that I was absolutely not expecting. Within about 30 minutes of consumption, we saw not an increase, but a sudden drop in the number of stem cells.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've been a researcher or in the lab doing this kind of work, but
I have.
when you do that kind of stuff and you see a response that is opposite to what you're expecting, then your first reaction is to think, okay, somebody is screwed up in the whole experiment. So we stopped everything, we cleaned the machine, did everything, we redid the study. And we got the same response. Okay, maybe our antibodies are just messed up. So we threw away the antibodies, bought another set of antibodies, which was expensive, by the way, and we got the same response. So, okay, then the problem is in our chemical reagents and the solution that we're using. We threw everything away. We bought new solutions. And after like 3-4 months of doing this, like we always get the same response. So there's a point you need to start to realize, okay, now let's dig into it. Let's assume that it's a real response. And then what we discovered is that polysaccharides like goji berry, like medicinal mushroom, beta-glucans, and colostrum, what they do is that they increase the density of the receptor that stem cells utilize to be able to identify a tissue that is in need of repair.
Okay.
So if you have more of these receptors, then the stem cell is better at migrating into those tissues. So as more of them migrate at once, well, they disappear from the blood circulation, so you get the drop. So then I'm starting to think, if what we want is not releasing stem cells,
For them to get to the location.
they need to get to the tissue. Otherwise, they're irrelevant in your blood. They need to get into the tissue. So if I find someone that drives them into the tissue, then I'm combining them both. So that's why you get now with Stemregen those 5 ingredients that release, coupled with the 2 top ingredients that make them migrate into the tissues.
Technically
Colostrum,
increasing the
beta-glucan.
receptors.
Increasing the ability of stem cells to recognize the tissues that need repair, so we drive their migration into tissues.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And now we need to, we're a dietary supplement company. We don't have Pfizer's $200 million budget, and that's probably low, maybe $1 billion budget to do studies. But what I would love, but now we raised funds and we're growing super fast, so we'll put more money in that research. But I would like to study indeed, when we use just those ingredients, what is the impact of only increasing migration? So we need to use animal models to study these things, but give an answer to what's the part of each ingredient, how much they contribute to the whole process of repair, all these questions. For me, it's fascinating.
Fantastic. We'll just take a short break and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back again to Lesung Batu Medic Show, and kita akan sambung perbincangan today berkenaan dengan stem cell, dan hari ini bersama saya lagi, Christine Drapeau. Christine, welcome back again. We are going to discuss about stem cells, and the topic of stem cells, when we think about plant versus animal cells, there is a herd of products out there claiming that a plant cell can sort of like mutate and become a human cell, and there's also animal cells from a placenta, from sheep, from horses, with all such claims that it can actually transform into a human cell. I know it's technically not possible. I've done enough of research to discuss this with my patients, but on a scientific perspective and on a research base, you as an author, what's your take on this, and how do we educate the public to actually create this awareness that these cells can go in form of capsulated form? They might release certain factors, exosomes, chemokines, growth factors, and that's as much they can do.
Yes. Let's start by saying these products are not irrelevant. They can bring benefits. They have some benefits. But from there to go to the marketing message to say that these animal stem cells or plant stem cells compare to what you would get with human stem cells is preposterous. Like there's no comparison.
It's heaven in it.
Yeah, there's no comparison. And the reason why this kinds of language exist, we need to understand, we've talked a little bit about this before, when we talk about the fact that if we knew back then what we know today, the whole field would have evolved completely differently. So we need to go back in the early 2000s, even in the late 1990s, right after the discovery of a method to grow human embryonic stem cells, which just brought back the whole field of stem cells. Even before that, we knew stem cells are not new in our knowledge. They knew in our ability to grow human stem cells and then apply them in therapy. But the knowledge of stem cells is before that. So before being able to utilize human stem cells and understand how they work and how to use them, this fascination of the power of stem cells was already there, and people tapped into whatever was available at the time, and it was animal stem cells, plant stem cells. But now that we know stem cells from humans, how to use them, their power, to continue to use animal stem cells, the only reason is because there were investments in these developments. There are businesses that are doing this, and they want their return on investment. Why would they stop if they're still selling? So it's more like it's a momentum now. The wheel is still rolling until at some point it becomes obsolete and it stops. But with the knowledge that we have today, these products have, in my world, they have no place. I'm not saying they're irrelevant, but if you have a choice, by far go with the human source.
Exactly. So when we look into, again, like products in the process of development today, like what you mentioned, that I would say like maybe 10 years ago, products of plant-based stem cell claims, animal-based stem cell claims had a place itself in the market. But the information and knowledge that we know of stem cells, like you mentioned, has evolved. And we have now the ability to understand better. Because like you said, there were benefits from these products. They were releasing certain signals that were maybe improving people's life. But today we have things that we can measure. We can measure in the lab and see that how certain products, how certain plant-based extracts can enhance this. Am I right?
Yeah. We found copper in the ground, and it was the best metal. So everybody goes for copper. And then you discover gold. And then because you have a mine of copper, you keep saying, no, copper is just as good as gold. It's just not. Drop the copper, go for the gold. It's really just that simple. It doesn't mean that the copper is irrelevant. But if you make a choice for your health, go for the gold, go for the human stem cells.
True. And in fact, just to also emphasize on the research that you made. See, there's a lot of ingredients that the thought process went through. When we get an extract in this fashion, are you referring to the extract of the whole fruit, or there's specific compounds that you're looking at?
It really depends which ingredient that we're working with.
Because there's a lot of benefits that we don't even see, or maybe don't even know now. Maybe in the future we'll discover, there is a dig down and specific extract from a specific production and manufacturing produces more tannins, more polyphenols and stuff that are also at the same time synergistically impacting the cell.
Absolutely. There are, I wouldn't say tons, but there are many, many examples in the history of medical research of plants or drug development of plants having specific active compounds. And when you hyper-concentrate and isolate the active compounds, it is either no longer effective when it's isolated from other components that were in the plants, or toxic. There are many, many examples of this in medical research. So for me, the point is not to purify these active compounds to the point where we cross that line and we're not as effective as what we can get with the whole plant. Remember, my strategy to identify these plants is to look at their historical use. They were not extracted in a lab through 2,000 years ago. They were just consumed as is. So what I want to do is really to do an extract of the most potent known bioactive. So you take sea buckthorn berry, for example. You don't have a lot of actives in the flesh of the berry. They're in the skin and in the seed. So the rest of the fruit itself is mostly water. So it's mostly coming from the skin and the seed. Aloe vera, you don't have a lot of the known bioactives in the pericarp. It's mostly in the gel. So we isolated the gel, made an extract of that gel, and that's what we tested, and we saw the effect. So it's the process that we've taken with every single one of these plants. And the thing that is also unique, and oftentimes people, if they're not scientists who know a little bit about how this is working in this industry, don't know this difference. When I talk about the research on releasing stem cells, it is on those ingredients that are in that product, not a similar ingredients that I found a paper about in the scientific literature that said sea buckthorn extract, and I got my own sea buckthorn extract, which is not the same that was in the study.
Exactly.
The entire industry, 99% of the industry uses research done on a specific extract, of which they don't know really how that extract was done,
And the
they
quality
go
of the
back
extract.
the quality, and they go and they get on the market wholesale a similar extract that has the same name that may have been produced completely differently, that could very well have none of the effect of what has been documented, but they take that study, they slap it on their ingredients and their product, and they tell you that their product will do that. They're honest oftentimes. Like, it's not dishonest. It's just like, to really know if your product is really doing what you claim, you need to do the work on that product. All the ingredients in Stemregen are the ingredients on which we have done that work in the lab.
Great. And looking into research and the future, how is the industry moving forward? Whether it's big pharma, whether it's legislators in the receptance of this technology that is coming along, whether it's in a capsule form, whether it's in a lab form, whether it's an IV. What do you see? What do you see the industry like?
You've asked big questions before, but that's probably the biggest. This could go, we need 2 other podcasts to cover that one.
Your next visit will get you in.
So let me try to be brief.
Oh, and brave.
And what?
And brave.
And brave. And let me try to be really very objective. Like, you hear what I'm saying here, you'll see it's just common sense. Okay, I don't want to be here telling about conspiracies, and so let's just be very, very objective. In our medical world right now, we do not cure anything. Think of any age-related so-called, degenerative disease. You have atherosclerosis.
Exactly.
You live with it. You have heart disease. We give you drugs to lower your blood pressure, diuretics, and beta blockers to protect your heart. We've not done anything.
And throw in the statins too.
And had the statins too. But I haven't done anything to help your heart repair. We don't cure anything on your heart. You have Parkinson. I slow down the development of the problem. We never cure these problems. Cure does not really exist, to the point that if somebody really reverses a problem, the conclusion will be either it was a wrong diagnosis or it's a miracle. But this idea that the body has the ability of getting back to its natural blueprint, which is its natural state of being healthy, it does not exist today in medicine until the discovery of stem cells. It changed everything. Stem cells can go and repair an organ and tissue. We have seen it. We have studies now done with Stemregen that demonstrates this with various kinds of health conditions. Stem cells can cure. It changes everything. It is the biggest threat to the current medical business, which is, I'm taking a very simple example. You have diabetes, I'm selling you insulin every day of your life for the rest of your life. If you don't buy that insulin, you don't survive. That's an amazing business model.
Definitely.
It's an amazing business model. If I have a choice here of curing your diabetes or selling you insulin for the rest of your life, from a purely business standpoint, like I'm a CEO of a company and my aim is to bring profit to the shareholders, which one do I choose? I continue to sell you insulin. Right there is the driving force of everything that you see in the world of regulation, how stem cells are blocked in their development, how you get regulations that are different in different countries, why you need to leave your countries oftentimes to get this kind of treatment. It's all a matter of politics and trying to preserve an industry that invests millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying. I'll leave it there.
I think what you said is exactly spot on. And what I feel is, as that process is taking place, I also feel there's on the other side of the spectrum, the awareness of people coming to understand that the dependency of drug has to change. Mm-hmm. The idea of, for example, even I've seen on your videos, you mentioned about fasting and how fasting more than 72 hours can actually impact your deliveries or your scale up of stem cells in the body, which we know it's true at the moment.
Yeah.
And we don't encourage people to do this. So it's too dangerous to go on water fasting for 72 hours, or it's too dangerous to remove your medication and start to be having a more carnivore diet, or moving away from lesser consumption of carbs. So the status quo, they just want to keep it status quo. And we see like time after time, year after year, decade after decade, that metabolic syndromes, osteoarthritis, joint degenerative issues as we speak, it keeps going up. Despite that we already have the ability to keep our age at more than 80 years old. As we mentioned, 100 years ago it was only 30, 35. Today we pushed the dial right up 50 years up the notch. Because of technology, we're not denying technology, but you see, at the current point, the industry, the science, it's really scaling up, that we are unboxing another Pandora's box here.
Correct. With stem cells, it changes everything. So if I put aside, I mean, it's a little bit utopia. We cannot put these things aside. But for the sake of the discussion, let's put aside these forces that may try to not delay the development because there's a profit or a benefit associated with it. Let's say we look at these forces of medical development and see where are we going with what we know today. It's absolutely undeniable. The medical profession, from academia to the practice, will have to just recognize that we did not know before, but now we know it. The body as an additional system. It's the repair system. Just like you have an immune system, you have a repair system. It's hard to swallow because the last time we discovered the system, it's in the early 1900s with the endocrine, immune, and nervous system. By academia, by doctors, nobody today alive is born in a world where we did not know these 11 systems that we have in the human body. And nobody today is born in a world where we have discovered that there's a new system. So it's something that is hard to wrap your mind around. But stem cell research has revealed clearly the body has another system that we just did not know. It's the repair system. What do you do when you have a cold? You boost your immune system.
Exactly.
What would you do when you have an injury? You boost your repair system. So when you understand that repair in any organ and tissue of the body is based on stem cells migrating into that tissue and repairing the tissue, that means anything that is associated with tissue failure, tissue malfunction, because organs are all a lump of cells. So the health of an organ is the sum of the health of its cells. So you bring stem cells that migrate in that tissue, and you can really bring rebuilding and true repair to organs. Once that really sinks in, any issue that you have, you go and see your doctor, the first thing should be, okay, let's start by boosting your innate ability to repair. It will be like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So that will be the first step. And then the second step is also to understand that with that decline in the number of stem cell number, we need to understand that past 30, 40 years of age, the problem that will develop 20 years later, they have started. They have started because you don't have enough stem cells in circulation to really offset the normal process of tissue turnover. So once we know this, you start to take vitamin C and magnesium and all kinds of things. You like polyunsaturated fat, omega-3s. Well, there's a point you need to start in your 30s. Let's start to put more stem cells in circulation so that the health that I have today, I still have it 3 decades down the road.
Yeah, I think
this will sink in. And then in a broader scope, with true scientific development, stem cells now could go and repair, like a heart, for example. You could do genetic manipulation of stem cells to drive them to go into tissue. And there's a lot of genetic diseases right now that we probably will be able to reverse. Stem cells will migrate specifically into a tumor. They're attracted to tumor. What if you tweak stem cells to now start to produce some sort of cytotoxic compounds? They migrate in the tumor and they kill the tumor. All of these will also be developments. But quite frankly, the vast majority of the population spends the vast majority of their lives healthy,
on medication,
just slowly aging.
Exactly.
Slowly aging, having a quality of life that lowers. We start to give them drugs. We never cure them. They keep putting along with losing their quality of life, and all of that is caused by not enough stem cells. all these people, before the big diseases have developed, we can change this entire picture of health just by boosting people's ability to repair.
And that thought also brought me to a point of thinking like, look, if we could actually start this knowledge of biohacking at a younger age, that means teens, early 20s, they need to know like what they need to plan. It's almost like a wealth management.
Correct.
It's like a health management 50 years down the line. You need to look, if you're going to do this, this is what's going to double up your stem cells, because you see, now in the early 20s, this is the peak point. You take it or leave it. So if you have the ability to enhance the volume, the number, the duplication of cells, technically you are going to age.
I mean,
you're gonna make the curve way further down.
My next line of research right now, I don't know what we'll discover. This is probably 5-10 years of research, if not more. But are there ways, plants or whatever, that can slow down the conversion of the red marrow? Or are there plants that can reconvert the bone marrow, the red marrow, from yellow marrow to red marrow? If we can find ways of doing this, this is a Nobel Prize. It will be like the biggest thing in longevity. Meaning I would give you at 50 and 60 the number of stem cells that you had at 20. It changes everything. It changes everything.
That will be the real anti-aging.
Yeah, because on the point that you had before, go back, let's say, well, when I was a student, go back in the 80s. They're starting to talk about prevention. But prevention, so everybody wait to develop the disease, and then when you have it, you have to deal with it. So now the language of prevention started. But prevention is simply to prevent the problem. You're not really healthy. You're just not having the problem. So now comes biohacking, which is, well, let's try to really reach your optimal health, so that at least until such time as you develop something, or maybe you never develop something, in the meantime, you got optimal quality of life. And to me, I compare this a little bit like today you get compound interest. Take a 15-year-old, but if you have $100 extra in your pocket, don't go and spend it on and whatever. Put in the bank. Put in the bank, compound interest. This is going to be millions of dollars, when you reach 50 or 60. So I think the same thought process will go for health. Once we start to realize how stem cells play a crucial role in staying healthy, you will start, as you age, you'll start in your 20s to say, okay, now it's the time to start to basically increase the number of stem cells to really help replenishing all the tissues, and keep doing this so that when I hit 70, I really have the power that I had in my 30s.
Wow. Any messages before we wrap up? To the Malaysian audience out there.
To the Malaysian audience, I will certainly come back because I love Malaysia. It's not just the durian, it's the people. So we'll be back and we'll do more of these.
Thanks Christian. So terima kasih kepada semua yang sudi tonton episod kali ni. I think secara rumusan, stem cell memang adalah salah satu sel yang memang ada wujud dalam badan anda. Tak perlu difikirkan untuk mendapatkan stem cell daripada luar. Tetapi apa yang paling penting is bagaimana kita memperkasakan innate stem cell kita, ataupun stem cell yang telah wujud dalam badan kita, yang wujud dalam sumsum tulang kita. Antaranya ialah pemakanan-pemakanan yang mengandungi komponen ataupun compound-compound yang boleh memperkasakan ataupun menduplikasi bilangan stem cell lebih tinggi dalam badan. Antaranya daripada stem region, mereka ada sediakan beberapa ekstrak tumbuh-tumbuhan daripada sibakton, alge biru yang khusus, beta-glucan, kolestem yang boleh meningkatkan peratus stem cell dalam badan anda. So, sehingga kita bertemu di episod yang akan datang, kita lesung kau-kau. Lesung Batu Medic Show.